Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia. This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
How are we doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well.
We are in the kind of sunny part of February.
It's that time of year when you start to feel hopeful for spring, but then your hopes get dashed over and over again because it gets super, super cold again.
Yeah.
But we had a couple days this week where I went outside.
It was 70.
Forgot what that was like going outside.
And then it went down to 19, and that's why I sound the way that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not great.
As I sniff and snort. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll do that wonderful thing when we change our clocks again, and then it becomes dark again. I can't wait.
Yeah, I really wish that the people who like to make noise and start online petitions about that would do it at some time of the year other than when it's the thing that everybody debates.
I also wish those people actually went outside when it was dark.
Yeah, daylight savings time awareness. We need some people protesting.
It's about to be me in a couple weeks. Yeah, so this is a fun fact. Our current sophomores and juniors were the two groups that were affected by COVID in middle school. Right. So they didn't get to go on their Washington, D.C. trip, which is something that...
A rite of passage for 8th graders everywhere in the U.S.
Well, at my district. That didn't happen when I was growing up.
Really?
Yeah, my school, they didn't start going to D.C. until I was in high school.
That's interesting. When I went to college, I had a lot of friends who, and a lot of people said they did it in 8th grade year for some reason.
Yeah, I think you're...
It's a common thing now.
Mostly correct, but it wasn't really common in my area for whatever reason.
Actually, I would love to know that. I would love to hear from listeners if your school districts have decided that taking kids physically to DC is an important trip. I'm really curious about that because I think it's a super interesting opportunity for kids to leave home, first of all, because not all of them have that chance anyway at all. Getting to go to the heart of government and getting to see how the sausage is made in America is kind of an interesting it's an interesting thing to do, and I hope more kids have the opportunity to do it because I certainly had a lot of fun when I did my 8th grade DC trip.
Sure.
I thought it was important.
So anyways, we're going to take these two groups because they didn't get to go, and I am going and my dad is going as a chaperone because he has spent some of his life as a tour guide. And,
for DC.
So he's going to break out his walking shoes and run it on back with us.
Walking shoes.
And we're going to be gone for 3 days. Mm-hmm. I just don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to you being there with them because I know that you are an English teacher, but history is sort of your first love. Yeah. And you know an awful lot about DC and DC history.
I'm excited.
All of that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sent Chelsea a tweet because, as you all have heard me talk about multiple times, I have a deep love of the cherry blossoms. And so I was secretly hoping that this trip would be a little bit later so that they'd be
peak bloom.
I think it's not quite late enough because we're going to be there in the middle of March. So
I see.
I think we're going to be a couple weeks early, unfortunately.
Bummer.
But maybe you and I can run back over.
Sure.
And see them again and walk a mile to stare at them and then walk a mile back to our car.
It was very cold that day that we did that.
But they're so pretty.
They are so pretty.
It was so cool to see them. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, that was the COVID year. That was 2020. Remember we tried to drive down and see them and they had it all blocked off?
Yeah, that was the first time we tried to see them. So I lived in Annapolis for almost a decade and somehow living so close to DC, I never actually got in to see the cherry blossoms because it's the thing that all the tourists do. So everybody who lives there is just stay away from DC for these couple of weeks or whatever. But but we wanted to go.
So it was 2020 and we're
this will be an easy thing because you can just drive without getting out of the car and you won't
it's a safe
endanger
event.
Anybody.
Well, and at that point we'd been in our home for what we thought was a long time. It was only a month. And
we thought we'd really gone through.
We thought we had
point. We thought we were really surviving by being indoors for a month.
I think we went for a week, just kind of a little spring break for us.
Well, I still lived there at that point.
Well, I know, but I mean, I got out of Ohio, which was very exciting. And so one of those days, we were well, we should just take off and go see what's going on in DC, because the cherry blossoms are in peak bloom, but no one was allowed to see them. And they really didn't want anybody near him. They had like blockades. They had like cops sitting there. Like you couldn't even.
That whole area was
it,
blocked off.
The basin.
The tidal basin, the entire area was just blocked off.
That was their chance to offer a driving tour.
Yeah.
They missed the mark.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we did get to see them last year, but maybe I'll get to see a few trees this year with my kids. I think that would be fun for them to see them.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We are doing the most touristy of tourist things, but we did get the whole 3 buses in.
Yeah.
To tour the Holocaust Museum.
That's great.
So,
I mean, you kind of have to do the touristy things when you're when it's like their first trip.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
And we are going to do Arlington. Mm-hmm. And our group got chosen to lay a wreath, which is very exciting. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get to visit the grave of our hometown hero. So that'll be fun too.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I'm excited. Now, that week, ask me when I get home on Friday night if I'm still excited.
No, I don't think I'll be. I don't think I'll be making speech.
Yeah.
I think I will
when
just
I walk
be
in,
silent.
I don't even want you to look at me.
No, I think I will just be silent for a few days while you recover.
I think I'll just be so tired of being talked at by teenagers for 3 days.
Right. So I will just be silent for some measure of time.
Actually, as soon as I walk in, can you just like have a $20 bill and your car keys in hand and we just go straight to the bar?
Straight to the bar. You got it.
So anyways,
got it.
I'm excited for that. And it's going to be a fun 3 days with the kids.
Cool. So. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, and
I would love to hear an update.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that could be our debrief episode. Where I talk about
to DC.
10th and 11th grade trips to DC.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So anyways, that's what I have coming up.
Cool.
Okay. So this episode.
Yes, this episode. Before we get into the meat of it.
I need coffee. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Yes. Very important.
Okay, I'm ready now.
Okay. Before we get into the meat of this episode, I did want to just take a moment. We had a listener write in. Had a really interesting note from Maria in Madrid. Maria wrote, "Good morning from Madrid, Spain. I'm currently a teacher trainee in Spain's Teach for All program. I listened to your last episode about foreign exchange programs. I went to Canada for a year when I was in year 11, and I'm a big fan. Apart from learning the language and having an interesting cultural experience, it also taught me about dealing with change, uncertainty, and facing challenges." A draw-in for me was taking courses like theater, band, and cooking, and participating in extracurriculars like track that would not normally be offered in Spanish schools.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really neat. I fell in love with studying abroad, and I chose to go to university abroad too. At the same time, I do agree that these programs should be available to students no matter their socioeconomic status. In Spain, there's a scholarship program financed by Amancio Ortega that sends you to Canada or the US for a year, covering most expenses, including travel. Even in this case, the language and academic requirements to get these scholarships often rule out kids that cannot afford to pay for after-school academies and private tutors. Thank you for teaching me so much about teaching. Cheers, Maria. Thank you, Maria.
Oh, that's so cool.
I love to hear from you.
I hope you're well.
This is I looked up this this scholarship program too, and this person that Maria is mentioning is he's the guy, I think among others, he's the guy who started the Zara fashion brand.
Really?
Like he's he was at one point the wealthiest person in Spain. So
cool.
He's like a big guy, but I thought it's interesting that he's
good for him for throwing some cash that way.
I think it's super interesting actually that like a Spanish businessman would be financing scholarships to study outside of Spain. I think that's super interesting. But yeah, it's a good opportunity.
I think that tells you what's really important, and then that's the chance to learn.
Yeah, the chance to learn outside perspectives and like kind of grow and see more of the world. And
it's got to be an important business skill.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially
absolutely.
for a worldwide company.
Absolutely. So
cool.
Yeah, we love to hear that little follow up. Thank you, Maria, for writing in. We love to hear from you.
Thanks for listening.
Come on and say hi. Yeah, thanks for listening. Anytime any of you hear anything on the show you would love to write in about, we love to hear from you. That was neat. A fun episode that we did a couple episodes ago. So thanks for writing into us, Maria. Okay, so do we want to get into what we were talking about?
Let's do it.
This episode, because we've already been talking about it a little bit, we are going to be talking about some of the ways in which educational praxis has evolved in the face of modern technologies. Now, we've done a couple of different episodes on the ways in which technology impacts classroom education, but we haven't really taken this one kind of like head on. We had episode 5, we talked about cell phones in schools, and that was kind of specific to like being distracted by social media.
So long ago.
Yes, that was a very long time ago.
I probably have a very different opinion today.
Yeah. That was one of our very first episodes. And we also, episode 44, we also did a deep dive into assistive technology in classrooms. But now we're going to do something a little different from all of those things. We're just going to kind of talk about the impacts of some of these more current and sometimes scary and threatening technologies, really kind of like world-shifting technologies, and how those technologies dialogue with what's going on in the classroom, and how teachers, how educators have to either embrace them or reject them or figure out ways to teach with and about them, all these different ways that technology impacts the classroom.
All of the ways. Which is every way.
Maybe not all of the ways, but we'll cover many of the ways. A lot of my research on this topic, I read a lot of articles that were kind of constructing this as like a technology, yes or no. Should we allow it? Should we not? Kind of like a very like us versus them about whether or not technology should be used in the classroom at all, which I think is incredibly naive at this point, and I'm going to suggest that we reframe the conversation and kind of not look at it as a should we use technology in classrooms or not?
There's
because
not really
like
an option.
There's really not anymore, and I think a lot of that writing that I saw is sort of out of touch with the many ways in which technology can help classroom teachers and can present interesting learning opportunities. Now, again, I don't want to, as a technologist myself, I realize I can be a little more gung-ho about these things than normal. But I also want to say that I'm not so lovingly embracing of technology that I would just want to substitute it for everything all the time in the classroom. But I do think that it's important for educators to find ways to work with technology rather than have technology work against them. Yeah. So we're going to just talk a little bit about some of that. Schools play a really big part even in advancing technological innovation. So these innovations that we're going to talk about, I mean, partially they come out of the academic machine. Yeah. So,
but also the money can be so limiting that that's part of the factoring for me, I guess, as we have this conversation, is acknowledging that what the technology is in a classroom is very dependent on where you are learning, geographically speaking.
Yes. Yes, very true. School district funding on a district by district basis for various kinds of technologies. The use of technologies in classrooms is limited on a case by case basis. So a lot of what we're going to hear is going to have those constraints around it. But let's just get right into it. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was, and I think you can speak to this a lot, I wanted to just kind of frame things by backing into this bit of a dichotomy that I see between like the Google generation and what I'm calling the Google generation and the platform generation. Now, you and I...
That's actually,
You and I are the Google generation.
We are.
And what I mean by this now, so like for schools, again, this is all about in the context of schools. When we were in school, learning to Google well became a huge part of writing and researching, especially in high school. I don't really recall before then getting much instruction on this, but when we got to high school, I definitely remember time being set aside out of art. Like we were pulled out of normal classes to go to the library and learn how to search for things online. Using a reference system was probably what that might have looked like before. So like that same instruction time that we took learning how to find things on the internet, previous generations might have taken that same time to learn how to use a library reference system.
Yes. Yes, which we did.
We also have some of that. I remember in elementary and middle school learning how to use a library reference system. So
me too. I remember writing an essay in middle school using it.
Yes.
Yes. There was a library class you had to take as a middle schooler at my school.
That's neat.
Yeah, so we spent a semester in the library and we learned how to do searching and citations and the Dewey Decimal. We learned like Dewey all of that stuff. Yeah. It was now I'm very thankful for that course. That was the first class I ever wrote an essay in.
Yeah.
It was about Michael Jordan. I had to use research. Yeah.
Well, that kind of thing though is what I'm talking about is like critically important. And what I want to kind of talk about is how it's being evolved even beyond what you and I learned.
Yeah.
So you can speak to what's going on now. But like when we were in school, and this gets talked about as if it were a soft skill. And so it doesn't get quite the attention in, you know, curriculum discussions and stuff. But like methods of research, learning how to discern sources that are viable and not, learning how to know what is trustworthy on the internet. These questions are all becoming even more complicated. Yeah. As we'll see, as we go through this list, we'll realize why these conversations are becoming even more difficult and why teaching kids how to research online is becoming even more challenging than it was when we were in school. But I think that is the single biggest thing that I can think of in terms of when technology started to sort of take over the educational experience, was when we were writing essays and it became all about making Google work for you. And I still use to this day many of the lessons that I learned in the how to make Google work for you. Like I remember specifically learning how to use like search filters.
Me too.
So like, I don't know if you all know this, but like listeners, you can basically make a Google search. You can add certain terms and like ways of constructing your search to limit or like return only results within certain time frames or from certain sources or websites. There are all these little tricks you can use that are just little tricks.
What are those called?
Boolean?
Boolean? Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Boolean operators?
And phrases, yes.
Yes, there are logical operators that you can insert into search strings that make it so that your results only return certain kinds of results. And it makes it easier for you to find what you're looking for if you know how to use those. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think Google search is broken right now and is becoming more broken. And I'm starting to see more writing about this online. But people are starting to talk about how they're now having to sift through way more search results than they ever had to search through to get a good result.
For what they want.
From Google, which is super interesting. Search is not a solved problem. Google went so far in the direction of positioning search results based on like SEO hacking and money, so far in that direction that it's kind of muddied the waters of its own search results. And now people are having to, yet again, relearn how to make Google work for them. So anyway, that time that we took about learning how to Google was, I think, the biggest part of technology interfacing with education that I remember entering my high school life.
Yeah.
We had less to worry about back in these simpler days. Sorry.
We did, but I think what we also learned was a general way to find the information without having to Google the question we were asking. Does that make sense? Like, okay, so for example, my sophomores always do a college research project, and it's like one of the things that, if I'm talking about Common Core state standards, it does a lot of things because it's research-based and it's also a presentation, which the Common Core does have listed, or public speaking skills. So
you're saying that researching for their own colleges also has them do things that they're required to do by Common Core, which is neat.
Yeah, so the students create a presentation on an in-state and out-of-state college, or if they don't anticipate being college-bound, then they create an alternative project about their future job. So on the college research project assignment, they have to find things like in-state tuition, out-of-state tuition, majors, minors, religious affiliation, what they're known for, just like housing opportunities, right? Like the bread and butter of learning where you want to go to school.
Stuff that they should be thinking about anyway.
Right. And so when I was first teaching this, and I've taught this now, I think 9 times to sophomores, I would see them just go to the college's website and kind of just click around and find what they needed. If you were to watch my students today complete their research, their Google search history would be, what is the religious affiliation of Duke? What is the out-of-state tuition cost for Duke? They don't go looking at a source and hoping to find a bunch of information. They only go searching for the one question.
Interesting.
And so when I started looking at
Is that good or bad, do you think?
It's awful. Okay. It's awful.
I just wanted to make sure.
Because they'll so if it's like, what's the religious affiliation of like Ohio State, let's say. So when Ohio State started, it was actually a farming school. It was like an agricultural school. So it has evolved over time, as a lot of large state universities have. So what they will yield at the top is not accurate to what Ohio State is today.
Yeah.
And so they'll be like, oh, this is that.
So they'll think that the out-of-date result is the recent result?
Yeah,
okay.
and it's because historically speaking, that was maybe once true before a university combined with another, and then they no longer whatever. So the best example I have of this, I had a student a few years ago now. They were researching, it was Kent State University in Ohio. And they had to tell me, like, what the city is like, what are there to do, or, like, what's there to do on campus and off campus and all of this stuff. They had all the Kent State information, like, mostly accurate, but they were like, oh, in Kent, England, you can do these things.
Oh, no.
And then they started talking about the White Cliffs of Dover.
Oh, no.
And they were like, well, I know Dover's in Ohio. And I was like,
oh, no.
What did you search? And they did the entire presentation with, like, a picture of the White Cliffs of Dover. And I stopped the class and I said, has anyone ever seen this in Ohio? Have you ever seen the White Cliffs of Dover? Does this look geographically like Ohio? We have hills. We don't have the cliffs of Dover.
The White Cliffs.
And the student presenting was like, well, I asked the computer what to do in Kent.
Oh, no.
And I said, honey, you can't just assume that this is the only city on earth named Kent or whatever. You know what I mean? So, like, those are the failures of that type of searching, because all that kid's question was things to do around the city, right? Of the location of the school. They Googled things to do around Kent. They just inserted the school or the city name, which isn't actually the city name at all. But I mean, this kid lost a ton of points.
Yeah.
Because they're like, Kent, England this, Kent, England that.
Okay,
and
so that's one of the stories. That's
a mass shooting at Kent State University in Ohio. And then they come back to the White Cliffs of Dover. I'm like, you got so close.
So
and you were right for a minute.
That's one of the ways in which we have to be mindful of teaching technology.
So that's exactly why I'm saying that's the failure of that type of search. Because had they just gone to the school's website and clicked through everything, you know that a part of the job of any university is to tell you why you want to be there. They're not going to leave off what's fun to do around town.
So you think that possibly we've gone toward, like, an over-reliance in search that now makes us incapable of
it's too literal.
Focusing on the long term, like on long-form reading.
Yes.
So search is working against literacy, basically.
In that way.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's just like the goofiest stuff they write down. I'm like, what does that even mean?
Okay, well, actually, now that we're talking about the trends now, let's transition. So that I wanted to just talk about us being the Google generation. So us being, like, millennials, basically. Millennials are the generation that learned how to make search work for us. And now what we have is sort of picking up all of the pieces of the internet era, because now we are in the platform era, which the platform generation. And what I mean by that is your kids now have basically lived their entire lives with this collection of usually social apps that dictate, that put boundaries around their lives and essentially dictate the ways that they behave in school socially.
Yeah.
So
tell me about it.
We've seen many ways in which the effects of social apps can wreak havoc on school environments. But I guess I want to talk a little bit about how this kind of, like, platform first thinking makes its way into your classroom with your kids, living on Snapchat or living on Instagram or, again, it's, like, mostly social apps, but I'm curious to know just kind of, like, your observations of how these apps and these tendencies have changed the school experience.
I think they've just been intentionally served so much information that anything outside of that is difficult for them. My kids don't understand how a For You page works on TikTok. I mean, hell, some of our friends don't understand how a TikTok
this
For
is
You
extremely
page works.
True. Algorithmic social feeds,
right? Like
a lack of understanding of how the content that you see on social platforms is being served to you. That's really scary. That's really scary.
Yeah, and so a group of my students and I, we're all in the heyday, the game right now. It's just a game on your phone. And we had all played it when they were younger, like freshmen and sophomore, and they're seniors now. And we'd all deleted it in an effort to try to save. And that at that time, their grades and my time. And so one of my students who was probably the peak of heyday came in a few weeks ago and was like, I just kept getting served these ads over and over and over again. And then she ended up downloading it.
Wow. The advertising worked.
And that was how, and she was like, how did they know that? And I was like, well, your phone has a history of having downloaded it to your account. Mm-hmm. You have agreed to share this information somehow. And so Heyday is going to target people that the data tells them had once played and do no longer. And she was like, oh, I don't like that. And I was like, that's why you got to wonder why you're getting the ads you get. I've had students make fun and poke at other students because their TikTok For You page is thirsty. It's a bunch of thirst traps trying to get your attention with sexy content, which is on TikTok.
Sexy content.
You know what I mean? Like, it's only like TikTok has parameters around it anyways.
The sexy content on TikTok is somewhat less aggressive than the sexy content on other apps because they police the content.
They do
more aggressively.
So,
yes,
like when I say sexy, I mean
it's
what
thirsty.
TikTok allows.
It's people attempting to
just
present
attractive.
themselves as an attractive physically human being.
Right.
Yes.
So I'll have a student be like, "Oh, my entire For You page is
thirst
traps," and everyone around them goes, "I wonder why." And this kid doesn't understand it. And
so your kids do at least, some of them do at least understand.
No, some do.
Yeah.
But the kid who's like, why? I'm like, because you keep watching it. Because you repeat. Because you whatever. And so.
Because you dwell on
I mean, that was
content.
like me for like 3 months of my life. My entire For You page was Harry Styles. I don't hate it.
Thirsting for Harry.
Heavenly Lord, there was so much Harry Styles. Good for me.
I did have some questions about that.
Me too.
Why?
But it was one of those things where also what doesn't help you is when people send you these things.
Yeah.
And so I have one of my really good friends who is a former student is like obsessed with Harry Styles. So she would always send me these videos of him, which doesn't help your algorithm either, to be fair. But I was also partaking in plenty of Harry Styles TikTok. And so sometimes I'm like, oh God, please don't see my TikTok For You page because it's kind of embarrassing. But anyways.
I think you're bringing up a good point, though. It seems like what we're going to have to start teaching people, and this might change because we might be on the brink of the downfall of the large social platform app. We might be there because Twitter imploding in the way that it has imploded, and Facebook and Meta going kind of downhill in the way that it's going, or at least the
boomers will keep Facebook alive.
Well, that's the problem.
Forever.
So like Facebook is essentially considered a dead social platform for like it's not picking up the new young user, I would say. And they're in a world of trouble, and all of these other social apps will eventually have the same problem where they stop being relevant to the new user. So I'm kind of wondering if we're going to start to see a shift in how we think about these things and how people interact with and curate their own online content. I wonder if we're about to enter a generation where people reject the algorithmically generated social feed.
I think we are, because I think people our age are. I think people in their 30s are not having it.
I'm certainly not. I spend like no time on Facebook. I hate Facebook. I think it's actually like bad for society at this point. Like, I use it to stay in touch with like, high school friends and college friends. I don't have any other contact information for them. That's what Facebook is for.
Hi everyone. You're listening to 16 to 1 podcast. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/
it's true. It's true.
Podcast.
I'm just, it's good for, it's actually still good for that kind of communication.
Yeah.
It's good for like brands or creative endeavors.
Yeah.
It's good for like creative people trying to reach out to their audiences. It's good for those kind of things.
They have
still,
a great marketplace. How dare you? You can find all kinds of things on Facebook
It's just
Marketplace.
that none of those things are what I consider to be like the really good thing that would come out of social networking, and that's that human beings feel connected to and closer to other human beings.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like we're now. The new generation is, I think, the new generation. The youth.
Wow, how old are you?
I'm hugely old. The new generation, I think, is going to
the youth.
The youth. They're going to start to look for. I'm hoping that they're going to start to look for community-driven content that their friends have also found. I'm hoping that we start to be more responsible for the content that we see online, which means that I hope we start to reject the algorithmically driven social feed because it drives us toward our worst impulses, and it makes us loud and angry at one another. And by that, I mean like that kind of engagement is rewarded on these platforms. I don't just mean it makes us grumpy in an abstract way. I mean that these platforms are designed to amplify stuff that makes us mad at each other. That's because that's just what gets most traffic. That's what gets eyeballs. So anyway, I think it's going to be important to start having those kinds of conversations explicitly with our students.
Yeah.
Because like what you said, being unaware of why we're seeing what we're seeing on our algorithmic feeds, that's a problem. We should be aware of why we're seeing what we're seeing. Yeah. We should know why we get only thirst traps on our TikTok. Yeah. Like, we should have control over our behavior online and enough knowledge of how these things work that, I just think that we need to start becoming more aware of that sort of stuff. So anyway, so that's kind of like the platform generation is in a mess, basically. We have no life raft to throw to the platform generation yet, but we're hoping maybe there will be one.
Yeah, I think that a hope of ours, and I already know that this is true of some of my students, that I think my students today are much more aware of their mental health than we ever were when we were their age. When I think back on times in school, like high school for me, like I was certainly experiencing anxiety and things like that, and I wasn't aware that that's what I was feeling.
Oh, absolutely.
And my kids are aware of it, which I think is a good start, because I hear them intentionally say, oh, I don't want to look at my phone this weekend, or, things like that. So I think of the many benefits, one benefit of talking so openly about mental health and support and things like that is going to be the mindfulness of knowing what role your phone plays in it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important. I mean, I have my phone set on a routine, so it goes into my night mode at a certain time, and there are only certain things I can do, and that's usually when, I don't get texts, I don't get calls, I don't get notifications from social media, you know what I mean? So, like, I think that's good, because I think that's kind of put some limits for me. Now, I still play my heyday and do that kind of thing, but I'm not absorbing all of, what the worst of social media is, which is most of it right now.
Yeah.
And so doing that type of thing has been helpful for me, and I think I've actually been sleeping better, because that means at night I haven't been scrolling TikTok before going to sleep.
Yeah.
I play my little heyday game, I feed my cows, I go to bed. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it actually has helped me, because I haven't been instantly gratified by swiping to do whatever.
When Twitter started to really implode within the last several months, I stopped. I really don't spend much time scrolling on Twitter anymore, because it's becoming a wasteland. But when I stopped scrolling Twitter before I fell asleep at night, I started sleeping much better.
Yeah. So I've just, like, and these are just little changes, but, my phone goes into sleep mode and I don't get notifications for things. My Discord isn't beeping. Like, I don't know what's going on in the world, and I like it there. Those are just, like, good ways for me to end my night that aren't,
low stress.
It's been a good change for me. I definitely have been sleeping better.
Yeah, I think
because of those things. And I'm sure there are other factors, obviously. Yeah. But not staring at TikTok or whatever, the last thing I do, certainly has helped.
I think that in general, the conversation around mental health and technology, I think you're right. I think students are starting to have those way more than even you and I had them. It's interesting, because I think that social media actually has played a role in making people more comfortable in talking about their mental health. Because I certainly, I don't know how to convey this, because they're so ubiquitous now, at least on the social media I consume. Everybody is talking about their mental health. Yeah. And that's possibly because we're all hugely depressed right now. And,
things aren't great.
On the world stage, things feel not great. So, but anyway, I do think it's interesting that we're seeing some pushback now from these conversations, because people are starting to say things like, well, it can't possibly be true that everybody has ADHD or everybody has anxiety.
But wait.
And I'm like, and I hear responses to that being, people are like, well, we also used to not have very many left-handed people in the world because we suppressed left-handedness. And when you stop suppressing something,
products were made for right-handed people only.
So when you have a system that stops suppressing one subset of its own members for whatever reason. So if we stop pretending like we shouldn't talk about mental health because it's uncouth or whatever reason, if we stop doing that, then you're going to start to see more and more people become comfortable having conversations about themselves that they've never had before, and more people are going to start to wonder whether or not they do have mental health issues that they could address.
I still generally stand in, and I think this is because, and I know we've talked about this, is you and I have worked very hard to curate our social medias to be a place of good. And when they are not, we quit using them.
Because we know how they work.
Right. Yeah. So, I think us being aware of it has helped us a lot with that, because Twitter used to be a place that I would go to be depressed. And then I realized I purged it. It took me a day, but I purged my Twitter so hard that now I enjoy Twitter still, even with its quickly crumbling life. And our TikToks, Chelsea and I were talking about this last week. We were both like, our TikToks have like sucked. Like truly, I hated scrolling TikTok. There was nothing fun. It was all just whatever. So we both stopped. And that was, one of the things that I was like, okay, I'm not going to reward it. I'm going to stop whatevering.
Yeah. The TikTok algorithm is evolving now to the point where it's bearing down so hard on a couple of like for me, the only thing I get TikToks about are basically about like having ADHD. And I'm like, great, I know, I can't focus. Okay. Yeah. Like I would like
Show me the kittens.
I would like to be entertained by things other than my own mental illness. Yeah. So yeah, in general, figuring out how to make your algorithm work for you is not a thing that we should have to do, but it is a thing that we spend a lot of time doing.
It is.
Absolutely.
It's a very intentional part of my day. There's a feature on TikTok that if you hold down the screen when it's playing the TikTok, you can hit not interested in this. I do that all the time, and that does help curate.
I've started to do that more.
But I do it a lot.
But my problem is I don't want to say I'm not interested in a thing. Like, I don't want to tell it I'm not interested at all. I want to tell it stop showing me every single item of content in this category. I am interested.
Well, it doesn't do that.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying the problem is.
No, I'm saying when I hit I'm not interested in this, I don't stop seeing it.
Oh, good.
I just stop seeing it as often.
I got you.
Because why would they stop altogether? You
maybe
interact
I should try
with
that
it.
more.
That's what they want you to do. So they're not going to be like, okay,
that's true.
Never again.
That's true. I'm just afraid. I'm afraid to try because it's a black box because I don't know how to train the algorithm.
You know what you do?
Yeah.
If you think you aren't getting enough of your mental illness,
you start
on
searching
TikTok,
for it again.
Go to your likes and go watch one of the things. That's what I started doing. I would go intentionally search for like funny videos, and I would watch them. And then I would like it, and then they would start showing it. Like, I'm very good at training it.
But the real problem with it there is that you're fighting against the way it's intended to work. It's intended to work to be able to generate your algorithm based on all the information it has about you from every other digital footprint that exists.
Sure.
It's supposed to know.
But I'm not who I once was in a Google search.
True. No, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the algorithms are naive. I'm
trying to get it to evolve with me.
I know. But I'm saying the algorithms are naive, and we need to be aware of that because we do evolve as human beings. We change our likes, we change our interests, and our algorithms are still only looking at bits of data that it's scraped about us from the internet. And just becoming more aware of that generally, I think, is kind of what we're talking about. Yeah. And like making sure that our education system adequately prepares people for being clobbered in a mental health sense by these social apps. Yeah. Sad. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. I want to talk about some of the specifics when it comes to the ways that schools have responded to evolutions in technology. I want to spend at least a little bit of time because we've already kind of talked about digital collection management and libraries as tech hubs.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about how libraries are community resources on this show. It's kind of one of our favorite topics, but libraries within school systems also participate in some of these wider trends that we've talked about.
Yeah, and like at my high school, our technology is actually kind of spread out now that I'm thinking about it. Like our ag department has the plasma cutter, and then like we have a tech teacher and he has 3D printers and crickets and
That's actually what I was just going to ask about. I even left off like just the technology class, so maybe we can talk about that too, like what gets taught in the technology class.
Yeah.
But yes, so we've got spread out like computers, printers, 3D printers, cutters, like laser cutters, things like that.
Yeah, like at my school, all those things are kind of spread out amongst the different departments. So like one of my coworkers is like the business teacher, and they run like a school shop. So they make t-shirts and things like that for groups, or they do vinyl signs or whatever. The tech teacher does, well, they both use the Glowforge, but he also has like 3D printers and drones and stuff like that. And then, like I said, our ag department has a plasma cutter. So that's where like the bigger things go. Like our art teacher has a huge printer. So like all of those things kind of combine oftentimes for students because there's like parts to the whole all around.
So there are definitely ways all these technologies have made their ways into schools. They're kind of shared by different. The tech class, what is taught in a technology class curriculum? So the tech class is an elective at your school, and what kind of things get taught in that
class?
We're
also going to be offering an AP computer science class.
That's cool.
I can't remember what the title of it's going to be.
That's really cool.
And I think it could be interchangeable for a math class. I can't remember the exact trade-off, but I think that there's a chance you could switch a math for that course.
I think that would make sense.
So he has that. He has digital media and design. He has CAD 1 and 2. And then he has like a repair class.
Like technology repair?
Yeah.
That's
They're
cool.
always like fixing our Chromebooks, or they got a big donation of Mac computers and they redid all of them so that they were, and then they turned that into a fundraiser, which was really cool. They have drones that they will do, you know what I mean? It's all kind. They do like video production. They do a weekly news broadcast that gets
gonna ask about that,
put out on Fridays. They do a little bit of everything. Like kids will bring in like Switches and Xboxes and things like that, and his kids will work on them and repair them if they can.
That's really cool.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. And then he's just like my go-to tech guy because he's across the hallway and he's one of my favorite people. But it's really, if I could tell you anything as a teacher, man, get you across the hall from a tech teacher. There is nowhere better to be in that high school. You want to talk about quick service.
Super handy.
So great. Yeah, and they're always doing cool stuff. So I can always be like, what's happening in here? I can smell something. And smell something. Well, because they always like the glow forge obviously smells when they do the wood and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So they do a ton of stuff and he's always evolving that program. So it's been really fun to kind of watch him grow into what he does. But this would be another episode, but there's called like CTE funding in the state. And it's like certain programs are eligible for funding.
What's that stand for? Like, it's like career technology education?
Career tech planning and funding. Career technical education, supplemental.
Got it.
Funding.
Cool.
But like certain programs are eligible for it. And so all of the teachers who teach CTE potentially like funded classes, because it's not a whole program, it's classes that are specific. They're always talking together to be like, how can we piece together all the parts
pooling
to
resources.
create this thing? Yeah.
That's neat.
So they do a lot of that work together to try to figure out. And then like some of them get funding that can only be used on stuff for their classes, obviously. So those are conversations I'm never part of because English isn't funded. So here I am. But
no money for you.
But I'm happy for them because we really do get some cool technology. But that's like part of the support. When we talked about monetarily earlier, there are funds available, but it has to reach like a certain population. You know, there's all these stipulations for it. So those departments and those teachers kind of all work together to try to make sure they're getting the most bang for their buck. And then they collaborate on a lot of the work as well, which is really cool.
While we're talking about that, let's just go ahead and get into like device management programs. So like one-to-one programs or something like it.
So when I was student teaching, I was in a lower socioeconomic status like district, I would say. And they had funding from Apple at the time to be one-to-one iPads.
Cool. And
so the students paid a fee and they got to use the iPad for the school year and then they returned it and then the school spent the summer, you know, re-updating the tech and then passing them back out and all of that. At my high school, we are not one-to-one, and what that basically means for us is that our students are not assigned their own specific Chromebook and they do not like travel with it. This would have been a handful of years ago. The last time the English department was up for textbook renewal, I got a set of Chromebooks for my classroom instead of a textbook. And so it's actually much cheaper to get a set of Chromebooks than it is a whole textbook program. So our school is, I'd say, close to one-to-one. We almost are able to run it if we wanted to, but we just haven't finally pushed ourselves over the edge to be full one-to-one.
As you can imagine, tech companies made it priority one to start going for these like one-to-one device programs in schools because it's just like instant money for the hardware for tech companies, and then you also usually tend to get locked into pretty long-term contracts with these devices because once a school decides to go all in on Chromebooks, that's going to be their ecosystem for the foreseeable future. So these device programs are good in that they allow kids to be working with technology they might not otherwise get to work with, but they also can present logistical challenges for the districts who have to manage them. Yeah,
and we haven't, like I said, we haven't really push too hard to move one-to-one because most of our classrooms do have Chromebooks. So that's something I use almost daily in my classroom. We use like an online management system, which is called Progress Book, and that's like how teachers keep their grades, and that's what guidance used to generate report cards and things like that. And then we have Google Classroom. That there are a few versions of something like Google Classroom. It's basically just a virtual learning platform where
Blackboard is another one.
Yeah, there's another one called Schoology that's really popular.
I've heard that one be used a lot.
Schoology, every time anyone's ever talked about Schoology, everyone's like, Schoology is Facebook for education. And it does look a lot like it. Like the formatting and everything looks a lot like it.
I'm not sure I would like that. I'm not sure I want my school experience to feel like I'm using Facebook.
Yeah. So at my high school, I don't know if I'd say we are required to have a Google Classroom. We are heavily encouraged to have a Google Classroom, but I've been using Google Classroom for, I don't know, since it came out, and I'm a Google certified educator. I'm a big fan of Google Classroom.
Yeah, what happens on Google Classroom, just for those who are uninitiated?
Yeah, I mean, you can post updates on like the stream, it's called, which is kind of like the timeline. And so anytime I post, my kids are automatically sent a Gmail, like an email to their, we have a Gmail for everyone. So we're a
You're
Google
very
school.
in a Google
We are a
ecosystem.
Google world, yeah. And I will say, I've used a lot of them. I've tried Schoology. I have a Blackboard, and I am constantly fighting with Blackboard. Google Classroom is like easiest to learn, to manage, to operate.
I wonder if that's because we grew up. But is that because we grew up in a Google ecosystem? Because absolutely, like Google became the default suite of apps.
It could be. It doesn't have a lot of fluff. It's not a fancy thing, which I think is what it needs to be. Blackboard can do so much that it's intimidating to me.
I see.
So Blackboard is definitely like way more customizable and things like that.
Power user, target audience.
Like I used Blackboard in college and for my bachelor's and my master's, but I don't know if Google Classroom would be as friendly for a college level, but I can post assignments. I can grade directly on it. So Progress Book, which is my learning management system, they can talk to each other and import grades from Classroom to Progress Book, which important. I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big Google Classroom fan, and I've done like multiple, professional developments with my tech teacher about using Google Classroom. So I'm a little bit biased, but like I said,
well, you found a way to make it work for you, and it helps.
Yeah, I have.
You save time in your classroom flow and
stuff.
Yeah,
and like I'm deep in the Google world. It has just made my classroom so much easier. I have a Google slide that I update every single day with our schedule, and I've embedded code to have a real-time clock in it, and it has our...
Fancy.
Yeah, I taught myself how to do that. I thought you'd be impressed.
I am impressed.
But the homepage of it is a little Bitmoji of me and a cutout of the dog, and then it has all of these interactable elements, and they all take the students to the crucial websites of my classroom. And that's always on my Google Classroom, and that's what's projected on the board. I am, like I said, I'm deeply drinking the Kool-Aid juice. Yeah, it's like my favorite snack. Okay, so other than like learning management systems, we have Membean, which we've talked about endlessly. We have Kahoot, which is like a trivia game, like a study option. There are all kinds of those types of online opportunities for students.
These are all ways of like supplementing things you'd normally be doing in your classroom, but in a context that makes it easier for you as a teacher to like grade and
most of my
feedback.
students also use a couple of different websites to create note cards. They do that. My kids love note cards, so they love it on their phones and they love them physically. I don't think note cards are going anywhere. I think that's a pretty solid business they've got going. So, and I'm still like grab a note card. I'm like preaching
still the study habit of choice.
Yeah, but there are a couple of different websites that my students use, and it is kind of fun because when they create it, they can share it with their friends. So they do that a lot for like English or vocab tests or things like that, which. Why not? It's no different,
I do want to talk a little bit about some of the criticisms of digital learning tools, and we'll talk about because we're about to get into digital textbooks here. But there is some research to suggest that kids remember, well, not just kids, but everyone, when we're reading, we tend to remember better when we read from a print material rather than a digital one. Whether or not that is going to continue to be the case into the future, I think will be interesting. But for the time being, I think it is worth saying that sometimes maybe the old school paper way of doing things actually does have an educational benefit.
I think, I generally agree with that. My students right now are super into audiobooks. They love them. They want an audiobook of everything. And it's been funny because, so my seniors do a lot of self-led learning, and so they were reading Monster by Walter Dean Myers, which is much too low for them as seniors, but we do a bunch with it, and that was our fun piece. Anyways, they wanted an audiobook of it, and so I would see them, and I know multiple students bought the audiobook with their own money, and then they'd sit there with their headphones on, and they would be listening to the book and reading it, like looking at it at the exact same time. They love that. Which I love too, because I love audiobooks. And I'm definitely somebody that I am going to retain so much more if I'm looking at it and I'm hearing it.
Looking at it and hearing it, I think, is a really good, yes, for comprehension, tends to be.
So I always try to find at least a YouTube, you know what I mean? Like LibriVox has a lot of classical text, and especially, which is a free thing that you can use, and it's stuff out of, you know what I mean, like they're no longer in the domain, so like
public domain. Yeah, they're crowdsourced public domain readings of texts. Yeah.
So I recommend those a lot for my students, but I would say I really thought when my students started getting into audiobooks that they would not be looking at the book, but they're doing that still.
Interesting.
Like I would say like 80% of my class was sitting with their headphones on, reading their books, listening to the book, and just kind of...
I kind of wonder if audiobooks occupy a weird hybrid space where it's like, it's obviously digital media, but still happens in a way that promotes like memory and retention and stuff, because I also find myself wanting to... I gravitate toward like audio, long form audio and podcasts and stuff like that.
We listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Well, I find it, for some reason, easier to get through and to focus on long form when it's in audiobook form.
Yeah, so I love that they do that. I think that's a great tool for learning, obviously. And even my younger students, my 10th graders, we were reading Night by Elie Wiesel, and there would be days that I'd be like, okay, I want you to finish up the chapter, or, you know, just as like a transition, and they'd be like, can't you read to us? And I used to think sometimes they were being lazy, but they actually do prefer to hear it. Like my kids,
my comprehension absolutely would be much better when we would hear the teacher read it. I don't know why.
Love being read to.
Yeah,
they love it. Like on work days when I've got a couple things for them to do, and I want them to get this chapter, and you know what I mean. It's kind of like one of those catch-all days. They hate them because they want me to read to them. And so I got rid of them for the last unit because all they want to do is hear me read. Like seriously, I'll be like, okay, do you all want to read together? You know, I like give them options.
Well, again, I think it really can help with comprehension.
Yeah.
Because when you hear somebody reading something with inflections that properly convey meaning. Yeah,
because I've read it a million times, so.
Right. When you understand what you're reading before you read it, you can read it in a way that makes it more accessible. Yeah. And I think that's what, because I definitely remember.
But, of course, like for me, I go, oh, they're being lazy. Oh, they're, you know,
absolutely,
they're killing time, all this stuff.
It feels like, it can feel like that.
But I had so many of them be like, no, we love when you read to us. And I'm like, okay, like... That's all I want to hear. They're just like little kids. They want to be read to. Yeah. And I fully support that. One of my other coworkers, she reads to her kids and they just love it. I mean, I think and I've had so many parents comment on, they love that I read to them. And I was kind of always taught, like at this point, like they should be reading, you know, they should be doing it independently. They should be whatever. And I think with hesitant readers, this is one of the best ways you can reach them. And so, like, you know, I've read Night, gosh, I don't know, 300 times probably at this point, it feels like. You know, I read it 3 times a day, 10 years, at least 30 times, let's go with that, 4 times sometimes a day. But I still get choked up at certain parts, and they can hear me. And when I teach of Mice and Men, we listen to Gary Sinise read it, and so they hear me choke up about the damn dog, you know, like...
Well, I think that's actually the part that's important about it, though.
I know, but I think everything has always taught me that, like, that isn't what I should be doing with high schoolers. And honestly, if you told my kids that they could all grab their little rugs and sit in a circle around me and I'd read to them, they'd be pumped.
I think I want to challenge... No, I think I want to challenge the conventional wisdom on that, because I've totally heard that too about like, okay, well, by this point, they should be reading independently and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but what I think we have to do is balance the sort of cold, hard numbers of what kids should be able to do against how engaged they are with the learning. Because if they're not engaged with the learning and they're supposed to be doing it on their own, but they're not doing it or they're not comprehending it's not valuable anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So like, I think in that sense, the kind of conventional wisdom should still be should still be honored in a way as much as possible about independence and making sure that students can do the work on their own. But if something like this makes them more interested in their own education and gets them more engaged in whatever it is that you're learning or reading, I just think that there's probably not like an always correct answer.
I had my English 10 students write a list of 5 books that they loved as part of a writing activity we were doing with Sherman and Alexi, and they had written down one of the books I'd read aloud to them, and then 2 of the books my coworker had read aloud to them last year, and then 2 more from wherever. And I asked that student why they picked those, and they said, well, Miss So-and-so read them to me last year, and you read this one. And all of them had been read to them by a teacher. And I thought that was interesting. And I think there's a direct correlation to comprehension there. Because I bet those are books that they really understood.
To me, it's really about the comprehension, because you can't really like a book unless you understand it.
No.
And if nobody... Or you shouldn't. Yeah. Something's wrong.
I hope.
So that, to me, it's the comprehension piece. And I really think we kind of have a crisis of comprehension going on for exactly the reason that you were talking about earlier. Like, kids don't know that the Dover that they're searching for isn't in the UK or whatever.
Right.
Like, that's a crisis of comprehension right there. Yeah. And paying attention and like... all kinds of stuff. But anyway, reading in your classroom in a way that boosts comprehension, I know that, again, it might be against the conventional wisdom.
Takes longer.
Yeah, it takes longer. It takes more time out of your day that you could be doing other things with. But it seems like if the goal is like the real long-term goal is to get kids excited about their own education. For sure. I mean, it's obviously more than just that is the goal. But anyway.
So the other thing, as we're kind of wrapping up this portion, is that in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of textbooks going digital.
Absolutely.
And that kind of relates exactly to this conversation about comprehension, because research does suggest that people remember things better if it's on paper, and that students will prefer it. And so there was an article from Words Rated, and it said that the global digital education publishing market will grow by 17% annually by 2027. And that'll rise from $15.74 billion with a B in 2023 to $29.5 billion.
Yeah.
And
I was watching these charts go, and obviously it's growing so much because print is declining so much. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Like, part of the reason this 17% annual growth is happening is because all schools everywhere are transitioning from print to digital textbooks.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so just kind of looking historically, since between 1977 and 2015, the cost of textbooks increased by over 1,000%.
Yikes!
And the cost rose actually from 2008 to 2018 by 67%.
Okay, that's bananas. Why?
And just the last couple of figures here: 75% of students prefer a print textbook over a digital one if the price isn't a factor. And 60% of students said that they'd rather pay $20 to $40 for a print textbook than to get a digital version for free.
Interesting. So I will still a strong preference for print.
Yeah.
I would say for textbooks, I would also... I would think that I would have a preference for print with textbooks, because textbooks are so hard to use anyway.
My composition course, the textbook has been online for the last 5 years, and my students hate it. I think they were going to hate it anyways if it was print, but they super hate it online. Well,
composition. So, like, what does the textbook look like for a composition course? Like,
what you don't want to read about writing? Isn't that so invigorating?
Is it reading about writing, or is it examples of composition?
There are sample essays, but it's a lot of
reading about writing. Yeah,
not very exciting.
I think I'd rather do that in print than digital. So I totally get that trend. Sure. I did want to note about this because we've been talking about libraries. Digital publishing is so screwed up. It's so screwed up. So, like, for example, if you check out, and this is for our listeners, if you check out a digital publication from your local public library, for example, you check it out, that's already like a count against that title for that library, because the libraries only get like 10 checkouts per digital item before the digital item expires. And it's this completely nonsensical made up limit that publishers have put on digital books to try to make the same amount of money out of them that they do out of print books. So they expire them randomly after like 10 uses, so that the libraries have to pay for more licenses to lend.
Like, a book would have so many more lives than that.
Well, that's part of the problem.
Like, books will get checked out more than 10 times and be fine.
Well, the problem is that they've estimated these costs and usages based on the number of times you could check out a physical book before it just is destroyed. But the whole point is that their publishers are creating artificial scarcity for libraries, and if you have to wait like 6 months to check out an ebook title from your library, this is why. It's because the publishers are squeezing out every incentive for profit that they possibly can. Yeah. So anyway, these digital textbook things present with them their own batch of challenges, but also for students navigating these things, digital textbooks, not always the preferred format. And also, you could certainly expect to save money over the cost of a print textbook when you're using digital textbooks, but just kind of in the grand scheme of things, the whole publishing mechanism is still pretty messed up from my perspective. So anyway, all right, let's move on from textbooks. And you've already mentioned it somewhat, but your media class. So
yearbook.
Yes, you put together your school's yearbook, and I wanted to talk a little bit because this is a pretty present thing in most public schools in America. Almost all, like at least high schools, are probably producing some sort of regular yearbook. And I wanted to talk with you about how technology evolving, even over the last like 10 years or so since you've been teaching, has changed your processes and like how you get event photography.
When I got my job, I also ran the school newspaper, and I had the school newspaper for the first 3 years, and then it got eliminated. The local newspaper that we worked with got rid of it and moved us online, and then eventually the website got turned off, and that was the end of the school's newspaper. So since then, we've tried to figure out other ways to do publication. We've helped our administrative team create flyers and things like that. We provide all the pictures for the yearly calendar, at least from the high school age students, obviously. So we have kind of filled the gaps in other ways, but the biggest thing that we do is create our yearbook every year. It's 144 pages. And since I started, it has changed a lot. I used to have to sell yearbooks, write receipts on the spot. I used to have to accept ad sales and then upload them and have them mailed to Jostens, and then that's who our company is, Jostens. And now it's turned into most of my kids have a phone with a camera that's better than the ones I've paid for over the years. Yeah. And all of our ads are sold online now. Yearbooks are purchased online, so I'm not doing large deposits into our account. And so it's almost a completely, cloud-based event. They have picture storage on Jostens, and that's where we upload our photos. And then part of my class is that you have to sell a minimum amount of dollars for ads to help cover the cost of the publication itself. And then the other factor is that they all have to cover at least one event every 9 weeks that they have to get themselves to and have the camera and be where they're supposed to be and all that. And so my group growing like it's gotten into the 20s like it is this year. I started with 3 students. So I started with 3 students, and now I'm in like the low 20s, but I've had more than this even. Now it's a lot of them, they can upload directly to Jostens from their phones or from their own Chromebook, and I just make sure the pages are in the right order, and nice. So it's a self-oiled machine at this point, but it's also because I've got really good students who keep coming back year after year and do it with me, and Jostens has been really great to work with. This isn't an ad for them, but they have been, I've had my yearbook guy now for 9 years, and he feels like a friend, and it's been great. It's made it a lot easier because it's a lot of homework. I do a lot of yearbook during the summer. First couple weeks of summer is usually yearbook. This week I've got 2 basketball games to get to for tournaments, so it definitely is feast or famine in the yearbook world. And the fall is always the worst because we have the most sports teams events. Then. Yeah, so media now I used to have 1 camera, and only I would really take it because I was afraid to let any of the kids touch it. And now we have 2 super nice cameras that would have cost us 3 times as much if I'd bought them, 10 years ago when I started. And my students have to take a photography class to be in media, so they have to already know how to handle these cameras. That's nice. Because I'm not able, I know enough about a camera to be dangerous, but I'm not necessarily the best teacher of photography. So that's been something that I've incorporated as well, and that's been really helpful. We have a great photography teacher, so that's really helped kind of elevate our yearbook and make sure that the students who are taking the cameras know what they're taking care of. So cameras becoming more affordable has been helpful. iPhone cameras are super helpful, obviously. Yeah. So it's changed a lot, which has been a real gift, because there are times now where I'll have 3 events in one night and 1 kid can use their phone. And, that's great because I don't want to keep buying a bunch of cameras when I know. Yeah. You even mentioned this specifically, the whole thing, the interaction with your local newspaper. Schools are starting to, and I think will possibly continue to, fill the void left by the destruction of local journalism in this country. And it's unfortunate that your school newspaper
bid it in the same fashion because the local newspaper in which that was published evaporated. So as we see, like Gannett and other huge media corporations buy up local newspapers and then drive them out of business, basically. There are schools that are stepping in to fill this void. And I wanted to just call attention to this one really interesting story that I heard about this past couple of weeks. There's a suburban Detroit radio station, WSDP 88.1 The Park. It's a student-run radio station embedded in the school that fills a void left by the collapse of local newspapers. So the local Detroit paper coverage got bought up by Gannett and then stopped running. And now this school, they put together regular radio programming and broadcasts from their school, and the students run it, and they source stories from the community. The students take on the administrative burden of running the thing. I think it's a really interesting model, and it seems to be working and we'll link to this story in the show notes, but it seems to be working very well for this school.
It's awesome.
I think that there's a hunger for quality local news, and I'm hoping that we're going to start to see community-led initiatives to take over this kind of thing again, because I think that the destruction of local reporting has had an outsized and bad effect on democracy, and it's part of why some of these other problems of social media are happening the way they're happening. So to the extent that this kind of innovation is happening in schools, I think it's just really exciting and really neat.
I think that's exciting. I just think, oh man, local news is rough. I had so many exhausting arguments with the little newspaper that we had that it made it difficult to value it at the rate of which I would value it generally.
Yeah, no, it can be really hard.
Yeah. People have a lot of opinions, especially in small towns, about
Well, it's also
everything.
very hard to keep them solvent. It's hard to keep a small town news source solvent.
Yeah.
So
they're always mad about something.
Well, money, namely.
Well, I know, but I just mean, when the football team doesn't do well, it's hard to write about it. Is my story.
Well, also that, I suppose.
Because there are a lot of armchair quarterbacks.
Yes, many.
Yeah, so, and I think it was really damaging for me and for my students to hear from people like that, because we're just out here doing our best to, I'm just trying to teach print to students, and I can't help how games go or whatever, and so.
Yeah, but again, that's like a misunderstanding of the purpose of journalism.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that a high school student is the one to teach that.
No, absolutely.
That person about that.
It should not have to be up to
a lot.
It should not have to be up to the high school students or the teachers to have to defend.
So when
against
I'm
the
getting phone calls from the community about why their paper didn't get delivered, that's kind of that was something I dealt with consistently.
Fun.
Weekly, I got somebody call and tell me I didn't deliver the paper. You're right, I didn't. I don't
do that. That's not my job.
Call these people, Yeah. So anyways.
So I think that in general, yes, distribution difficulties aside, I still think that a possible resurgence of local journalism led by public education institutions would be pretty cool. I think it'd be cool. I like it. Although I also think that in those cases, the communities have to step up and contribute in helpful ways and not the ways that you were just discussing. Yeah. But anyway, all right, let's just move on and talk about, I wanted to cover the last two things I wanted to cover here were the most exciting ones, and they are, well, for me anyway, and they are
I was gonna say, are they?
VR, so virtual reality, and then AI models like ChatGPT and DALL-E and stuff like that. So let's just briefly, I don't have a lot to say about VR because I think that VR's entrance into schools has been it just is starting to happen now. We're kind of still on the cusp of it, but I'm a person who's very involved in virtual reality, and while I think that most of it is still like gimmicky and weird and hasn't figured out its footing yet, I do think there are a lot of opportunities for immersive learning with VR that we haven't really tapped into yet. And that's to say that in VR, you can recreate experiences that students might not be able to have in real life. And I think that there's some cool opportunity there. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I still think that technology is at the very early stages of what's possible. And I think that we are still kind of limited there, but we have some exploring to do and looking forward to some interesting applications down the road. And it also just gets kids really excited. My dad and I did a career day actually at your high school because we work with VR healthcare applications. And the kids, when we were there, were super excited about the technology and were really into it. And it's just weird and different for a lot of them. And so...
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about was this ChatGPT, DALL-E, other AI models, and deep fakes. The last thing I want to talk about is deep fakes because yikes. So almost everyone's talking about these things right now because ChatGPT's, and then also everybody else's copies of ChatGPT. So like Bing's recently released search engine and Google announcing Bard, which is another chatbot based searchy thing. Everyone's racing to promote these AI based tools now. And I think there's just like a lot of heat and noise around this right now because it's new and we don't really understand it. But it is already starting to make its way into educational circles and people are talking about it because I think there are a lot of conversations that we need to start to have about the ethical use of technologies like this. So I think we're going to start to have to talk to students about
Black Mirror.
Yeah, about how we're becoming Black Mirror in real life. And so all of these concerns that we talked about with why our algorithms work the way that they do on our social apps, for example, all of those questions about why the technology is working the way it's working should be brought into these conversations about stuff like ChatGPT. So anyway, these AI models, we can use them to generate all kinds of almost real, almost accurate facsimiles. And what we can produce right now are pieces of writing. So like essays and blog posts and things like that. We can make images. We can make music and videos and 3D models and computer code and equations and simulations. We can generate all of this with machine learning. And as you might imagine, the availability of these technologies can present some dangers for educators who have to evaluate whether or not the work their students are producing is original. So I would love to just hear from you a little bit about that. You know, with you, it's going to be writing, obviously. It's going to be, has a student turned in a thing that was written by a chatbot?
Yes.
But also, like, art teachers are going to have the same question. Is my student produced, like, have they turned in something produced by an algorithm, or is this work that they actually did?
I've had a student do it, and they weren't smart enough to know how to do it. So
to obfuscate it?
Yeah, because at the end it was like, hit continue for more, whatever. I was
They
like,
copied
what?
the hit continue prompt.
So, you know, luckily a lot of people aren't smart enough to know how to do it well. Also because any teacher who's been teaching long enough is going to know their students' written voice, and that's going to be the biggest indicator of what they're doing. So I don't think in too many ways it's a big concern just yet. I can see how it could be.
I do see a lot of think pieces, like, hand-wringing about this, though. Like, I see a lot of people writing to be like, writing articles and stuff about how basically writing for college courses or writing for high school courses is now irrevocably changed by ChatGPT because now we'll never know whether a student has produced something original or not.
I haven't asked ChatGPT to write me a 1,800 word minimum essay response using at least 5 citations. So, like, could they pick and choose parts of it? Sure. Am I still going to know that it's them? And I just use the reverse bot to find out how likely it is for it to have been written by an AI. And it's been pretty accurate so far.
Really?
Yeah, so far.
I've seen those things be touted as not being very accurate.
I have too. I have done it myself a couple times. I have had ChatGPT write something, I've put it in, and it's gotten 80% accurate on it. But mostly what I'm looking at it is like, okay, if my alarm bells are already ringing, this thing is saying there's an 80% chance it has been, that feels like a warranted conversation. And so that's where I would go. What I have read of ChatGPT essays so far is that the longer they write, the worse it is.
Yeah.
But that's also kind of how students write sometimes. So I might be even more confused. No. I think I'm going to ring Google's bell really quickly because I think one of the things that's going to help me is that all of my students have to write essays on Google Docs. So what I will do when I suspect somebody is cheating is I will go back through the edit history and I will look second by second at what happened. And if a paragraph just appears in 3 seconds, that's a That's a conversation. So I don't view it completely differently than I do just regular plagiarism, cheating. You know what I mean? Like, being aware of it is important. Them knowing that I know it exists is important. Me knowing how to use it for good is important.
Yeah, we talked about. I actually want to latch onto that a little bit because when we talked the last episode, it was what I learned thing was about ChatGPT because I was using it, and I actually did want to circle back because I was like talking about how cool it was, and I wanted to talk about how uncool it is this week because I asked it to write something. I asked after our episode, after last episode, I asked it to write me something to see what it would produce that was a little less structured because I was asking it to give me code examples, which were in general pretty good. But I asked it to do something that I thought it would do less well. So I asked it to write something that sounds like Tolkien, but in a modern technology driven setting.
Yeah.
So I wanted a fantasy novel, but with a modern setting. I wanted like a cyberpunk book, basically. So can I read to you what it wrote?
Yeah, can I type what I wanted to do really quickly?
Sure.
So I can be generating this while you...
So I asked ChatGPT to do this, and it provided the following story in response. It said, in the sprawling metropolis of Neo-Valinor, where the shimmering skyscrapers towered over the bustling streets and the hum of machines filled the air, there lived a man of great vision and ambition. His name was Elon, and he was a master of the art of invention. And then there are 4 more paragraphs, all of which are just praising this tireless tech worker named Elon. I just thought it was very strange that ChatGPT
chose him.
When the prompt was write something that sounds like Tolkien but in a modern technology-driven setting, obviously that has nothing to do with Elon Musk, and ChatGPT produced an essay that is essentially praising Elon Musk, paragraph after paragraph. Elon worked tirelessly to push the boundaries of what was possible. With a team of brilliant engineers and scientists at his side, Elon blazed a trail of innovation. Like, this thing that is supposed to write fiction is just praising its creator. So I wanted to just point that out, that these conversations that we're having about bias and algorithmic generation absolutely
is being impacted.
Makes its way into the results that these things produce. So take that for what it's worth. I wanted to say that I think that there are uses of this technology that can be innovative and interesting in classrooms. But with the technology producing stuff like this that literally just spits out a couple paragraphs of praise of its creator, like, we're obviously in the infancy of these technologies too. Even though they seem really cool, understanding how they work, the data that they're trained on, what they are how they're intended to work is very important for the modern learner.
So I had ChatGPT write a minimum 1,800 word response that compares and contrast. It's a compare and contrast essay using at least 5 cited sources. It starts off with this essay compares and contrasts, and so I'm going to know that's bad. It has no sources, and it also just ends in the middle of a sentence because that must have been where it happened.
There is like a word limit. If you hit keep generating, it should probably
well, I moved on. But then I did, and that time it had no cited sources. This time I did write a minimum 1,800 word response, compare and contrast essay using like 5 direct quotes. It is quoting things, but not properly. So I wonder if I said APA, if that would have done it. And it is writing an essay right now about traditional and online education.
Is it listening to us?
According to a study by the National Center for Education Statistics. So it does have a direct quote, and it's...
But the quote could be completely made up. So that's the thing, too. These could be completely made up, and probably are in many cases. The factuality of information presented from these things is completely suspect. So, like, understanding that the results that you get may have absolutely no bearing on reality is a very important part of understanding an AI chatbot.
Well, and the other thing that I do with my students is they have to turn in annotated bibliographies. And so they have to do the research in order to do the writing, which would obviously prevent something like this from working for them. This essay is mostly poopy, so it's fine.
Well, we talked a lot
Not like
last week
excited about
how,
it.
Yeah,
It's very formulaic, and it, there's no transitions. There's no.
Yeah, the writing it produces isn't good. We talked a lot last week when we were talking about what we learned with ChatGPT was like it's good for coming up with inspiration or looking for kind of getting the juices flowing and like getting things started or like finding questions that you're interested in. It's good for all of that stuff. And it should, again, whether or not you can actually even ethically use these is a question that I think is worth asking because they're trained on data that people didn't necessarily agree to allow to be used for this kind of training.
Yeah, I would also say the other gift of this is that, so it's writing about traditional online education and nothing is more recently cited than 2017.
Well, ChatGPT only works to stuff up until 2021. Okay. It doesn't
but still. So the other thing for me as a teacher is I'm going to be looking at this going, how are you going to write about online education and not talk about COVID? And that's part of what I teach my seniors is like your research should be timely and relevant. So depending on what you're writing about, citing something from the early 1900s may be fine.
Well, that's a problem that I was running into when I was experimenting with it over the last couple of weeks when I was using it to look at code examples. I'm as a technologist, I'm kind of interested in using technology to produce more technology. And the code examples it was producing were useful to a certain extent, but the platform that I was using to try to get code examples for has been updated in a major way since ChatGPT's data set of 2021. So it no longer produces the most up-to-date code examples. Right. So it produces good code examples that no longer work because the technology has evolved beyond it.
So I think a gift right now is that most of what my students are writing about is much more relevant and timely. And so they would have to, I mean, if they were going to copy and paste that essay and then have to zhuzh it up to make it timely, that's going to take them a lot of time. Yes. And basically by the end of it, they're going to have rewritten it. So it's not going to be much work for them.
Okay, so speaking of this problem of like kind of finding the diamond in the rough of what is produced by the algorithm, right? How do you think educators are preparing for the rise of deep fakes? And if you don't know what deep fakes are, they are, a lot of times this gets used in the context of video. People will produce what look like, for example, video interviews with world leaders. I've seen one with Obama be used as an example, but they create videos that look like real videos that sound like the person is really talking and saying something potentially horrible, but it's a generated video, so it's not real. So now we're entering an era where we can have videos floating out in the world of interviews with world leaders that are completely made up. It's basically CGI, fancy CGI. So we're about to enter an era where this idea of did it actually happen or not is going to be completely turned on its head because we're going to have digital evidence to suggest that events happened that did not happen.
But there are people who already believe that events happened that there's proof that they didn't. So
also true, but I'm curious to know whether you think that deep fakes are going to present a sort of crisis point with regard to this.
I don't know why it wouldn't. Yeah. I'm sitting here hoping that we're all smart enough to be able to do the smart work to figure it out. But we're not.
Yeah, that's my thing is that we're not.
So
unfortunately, we're not.
Do I know what it will? No, I mean, I don't know.
Like, how does the education system prepare students to enter a world where they can't believe the evidence of their own eyes and ears? That's the real question.
I really don't feel like that's that different from a few years ago. I really truly don't. There are people living in such a world that I can't even fathom it, how they can think it's real.
Like conspiracy theory world. Yeah, we did a whole episode on that too. Conspiracy theories.
I guess I don't. It doesn't scare me any more than anybody else who can flat out be told something and be proven it's true and just flat out disregard it. I mean, I still have I still have students, and I taught a whole lesson on Helen Keller this year who don't think she's real. What am I going to do? How am I going to...
That's true, except that now there's, like, instead of just, like, choosing to believe or not believe, now there's going to be evidence in a new way that can underscore, like, that can basically bolster things like conspiracy theories.
In my experience, these people don't have evidence and don't care for it because what their mind's eye believes is enough for them. I don't know. I'm like I have like no good response to this question because I see people living in such an alternate reality anyways that I'm like, you don't even have proof and you believe it. So what's having proof going to change?
Interesting.
Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think I just see such ignorant people so often that I'm like, well, you have no proof and you believe it. So why wouldn't you? You know, I don't know.
I think there's going to be a crisis, though, because I mean, I see what you're saying in that.
I have no reason to think that there isn't, but I'm just saying that I think enough of our world already lives in this that.
But the problems that you're talking about impact the people who are already inclined to, for example, believe in conspiracy theories. But deepfakes are gonna become more of a mainstream problem. So for the people who don't believe in conspiracy theories, deepfakes are like the mainstream version of this problem.
Could be a way for them to.
Because we're gonna start to have to, like, you and I are gonna start to have to evaluate literally every video clip that we see.
Yeah, I guess.
As to whether or not it's
this
real.
Is just me being who I am, but I already evaluate everything I observe.
Yeah.
So I don't really.
I mean, I think that's. But do you evaluate it? Like, for example, when you like see a TikTok from a late night talk show or something, you assume that the TikTok you're looking at really did come from the late night talk show and that the person really did say the thing that they're saying.
I think yes and no. I don't know. I don't expect the things that I get from TikTok to be 100% accurate or truthful. I expect that they have spliced this together.
No, but you expect that the video actually happened, though. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure,
not that the validity of any particular content, but you expect that the video that you watched is actually recorded video of a real event. So now we're going to get into the point where we see videos like that, but they're generated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna let myself be filled with this headspace of a new scary thing. I don't need more scary. I need puppies.
That's what we have to do.
No,
unfortunately,
I understand what you're saying. I think that deepfakes are probably going to affect the same people that already are easily persuaded. Does that mean that there's not going to have to be a learning curve to better understand what a deepfake is and how to look for it? Yeah, like I think if you're being mindful with technology, you're always learning how to best understand it and use it. And so I would hope that this is being applied in future use as well.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And like general skepticism toward what you see online is part of what we have learned and part of what we do naturally. Except I guess I'm just trying to say that I feel like deepfakes are of a different class because we're no longer just evaluating the validity of sources. We now have to like say, okay, can you produce the tape for me that this person actually said this?
But in my mind, I guess I don't see a deepfake any differently than I would a video that has been poorly spliced to make it sound like somebody said something that they didn't. And I know that you're saying that this has literally never happened.
Well, the difference is you can go back and get the original in that case.
I understand that. Yeah. I have no idea. I'm sure that I'll have to do like a 3-day learning seminar on this someday. It'll probably be my next round of professional development. It sounds awful, and I'm not excited for it.
Deepfakes, yeah.
Like, they already don't believe the world they live in, and it's around them. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just turning into WALL-E. I'd rather live on WALL-E's world.
We're turning into WALL-E's world. Okay.
No, I mean, I don't have any of these answers for you. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it will do because I don't know what will happen tomorrow in my classroom. Mm-hmm. So for me to anticipate what it's going to be like when somebody makes a video of Helen Keller saying she's not real, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm assuming that there will be technology that comes along with it that can tell us it's fake. I don't know what the answer is.
That's probably true, actually. That's probably a good point. Is like, just like we have technology.
I just hope I don't live that long. I think
you don't want to live in the deepfake era.
Because you're making it sound so awful.
Yeah, I mean,
and I would hope that like
the point of deepfakes is that they can be awful. Like that's the point of bringing them up. I understand
because they make like fake porn with deepfakes.
Yeah,
like I know that it's awful, but I just like I don't know. Is anything real? You know.
At the end of the day, is anything real?
I'm exhausted.
Okay, well, we made it through this technology discussion. I
should have known this is where it was going to end up. What will we do when the world around us is completely fabricated?
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about...
I will blast my ashes into space and
living in the
them
Matrix?
On a rock.
Uh-huh. You don't want to live in this Matrix.
I'm not taking a pill. I'm not doing any of it.
Okay.
If it's fake, it's fake. If it's real, it's real. I don't know what to tell you. I think my response to this is this way because... I just have flat out people who are like, no. And it's like, okay. I can't convince you otherwise. All the proof in the world isn't going to do it, so.
I think that's an interesting point.
Those are unreachables anyways.
The question of proof and validity of sources in a digital world is already really complicated in all of these same ways that are going to still be present when we have to start dealing with deep fakes.
There's all kinds of proof for plenty of things that people still choose to believe.
I think the point here with this deep fake thing is not about... It's happening at the level of proof.
I understand.
So that's where it's different, is that we're now introducing material that can be used as proof to show that this politician did something awful.
Yeah.
But they didn't actually. Fun times ahead.
No. I don't want to live that long.
Well, listen, educators.
I already hate it here.
Educators out there who are working on the question of deep fakes, please write into us. We would love to hear from you.
Can you not set it up for next year? Maybe like the following year.
Just write to me and don't write to Kate, because she doesn't want to hear this stuff, but point. I do.
That's true. I really don't.
Okay, let's move on to fill in the blank.
My job is so hard anyways.
I know. It's okay, though.
It's so hard.
I know.
I don't want more hard. I want more easy.
Okay. We'll work on that. Wow.
Okay. Last episode, though.
Yeah, let's do last episode's fill in the blank. If you know the answer to this question, write in hello@16to1.com. We would love to hear from you. If you have the question, we will send you some stickers if we hear from you. We'll also send you some stickers if you don't have the answer to the question. So just write in. We love to hear from you.
Don't be expecting them quickly, though, because I have a 3-month minimum turnaround on stickers.
We now have to get stickers to Madrid, so that's our new.
Did she give us her address?
Yes, we have to get stickers to Spain.
She did give us her address? Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't wait. I'll do that quickly because that'll take 3 months to get there anyways.
We got to get stickers to Spain. So anyway.
Last episode, go for it.
Last episode's question. As of 2021, the national graduation rate is currently at blank in the United States. This is for high school graduation rate. It is at an all-time high of 85.3%.
Woo!
85.3% of public school students in this country graduate.
Great news.
Okay. What is this episode's question?
This episode's question is, as of summer 2020, blank percentage of U.S. teachers reported conducting at least some of their teaching online from home. That's from EdWeek. So what percentage of U.S. teachers reported conducting at least some of their teaching online from home?
And this is a post-COVID number, so it's going to be higher than you might expect.
Yes.
Okay. And would you like to tell us what you learned this week?
Yeah, we watched the Netflix special on the Alec Murdaugh case.
Yeah. The name that nobody could agree how to pronounce, by the way. This special, they call him Alec Murdaugh. Mm-hmm. Everybody pronounced their names differently, which I thought was really weird. But anyway, yeah.
But I think we have another special to watch on it. I can't remember. There's another streaming platform that has another investigation that I would like to follow up with. But it's 3 episodes, the one we're talking about, and it's on Netflix. And as we watched it, I remembered putting more and more of the story together. I just hadn't ever streamlined it into how it's presented.
I totally remember hearing the news about this, but I thought it was news about 3 or 4 different stories, and it actually was all the same family story, and it's hugely messed up.
So we watched a special on that case, which is actually 5 different kind of cases involved. Mm-hmm. We're still watching Abbott Elementary, which we love. 1923 is back, which we also love a lot. What else? Oh, we're watching Better Call Saul, which is the, what do we call it? The prequel to Breaking Bad. Prequel. Which Breaking Bad is one of my top 10 shows of all time ever. Yeah, we've just been doing the February stuff, which is sit inside and watch things
and wish
while
that
it's
the weather
dark
were nicer
outside. Yeah, so I think probably starting, after the release of this episode and onwards, it'll probably be a little bit less gray in the world. But I did learn one thing really quickly.
What's that? So,
kangaroos have no real predators above them, right? They're kind of at the top
of the food chain.
Yeah, there's not really a lot that's gonna screw with a kangaroo.
I mean, I wouldn't screw with a full-grown kangaroo.
So, anyways,
they're scary. They do this thing. Have you seen this thing where they pose like they're bodybuilders? They puff up their muscles.
I just said they're ripped.
Well, they they on purpose.
They're ripped.
they're like bodybuilders posing for you before they kick you in the chest. They do that.
Yeah,
it's really
they could kill you. So, anyways,
dangerous.
When a kangaroo is feeling at risk, let's say, they will just go out into water, like chest high, and just stare at the thing that they're like, ugh. So it's kind of like their way.
That's
what
I do when I get threatened. That is what you do. I walk into a pond and stare.
And just stare. So that's what they do. I saw it on Twitter. If that's not true, it's hilarious anyways. But
okay.
Yeah. So they just kind of go out and they're like, nope. And that's kind of how they create a barrier to something they don't want to deal with. Human, whatever. Wallaby. I don't know. Probably not a wallaby. I think those were a lot smaller.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to use that technique from now on. Just walk into the middle of a body of water and just stare with my arms crossed.
No, it's not. They're not like stressed. Swimming. He just stands there.
Yeah, no. Okay. That's what I want to do. I just want to stand in a pond when I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it was somehow much scarier. Because I was like, what's going on? What's he plotting? He's plotting. Okay, what'd you learn?
Well, I learned more about ChatGPT just playing with it, and that's kind of what I was sharing about, is that it's actually not... I was kind of intentionally trying to make it go astray, and it sure did. That's pretty much what I learned about that. I also learned I watched. So I'm a big Trekkie, big Star Trek fan, and I've never seen some of the movies. And I watched the very first Star Trek, the motion picture, the first movie that came out with the original series cast, and it's really bad. It's really, really bad. Yeah. I learned that. I'm also reading a book called The Idea Factory, Bell Labs and the Great Age of American Innovation by John Gertner. It's very interesting. I'm learning all kinds of stuff about Western Electric right now, which I know somebody who worked at Western Electric from my committee. So I'm on a committee for the town, our town that we live in, to put together a 10-year strategic plan. And one of the people on this committee used to work at Western Electric. And I was just talking with him about all of that. But then I learned about what Western Electric did and made, and it kind of... it was the company that made communication function in this country for a long time. They produced all of the like physical parts of the system that connected the early telephone network in this country.
Interesting.
So like vacuum tubes and all kinds of fancy stuff that was at the time at the forefront of innovation was produced by Western Electric. So anyway, that's awesome. That's what I learned, and I'm going to keep learning about Bell Labs and AT&T and cool. all of that age of innovation. So yeah. Been a good book. All right. Any final thoughts? Wrapping for the week?
No.
You're gonna go stand in a pond and cross your arms
and think about
toward the deep fakes
and how I will ever deal with it in my classroom.
Okay.
Have a great 2 weeks, everyone.
We will talk to you in 2 weeks.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
Wow. Oh.
You know the guy that played him in the movies?
Uh-huh.
Would actually say the lines that he was supposed to be saying.